Well, yesterday was a pagan day in America. There was a giant solar eclipse, obviously, that moved all the way across the United States over the course of the day. And it was pretty fascinating to see the responses. The reason I say that it was a pagan day in America is because there are a couple of different ways that you could view something like a solar eclipse. So if you were a normal person, you'd view the solar eclipse as a wonderful example of science at work, an incredible example of the workings of the universe in which the sun is eclipsed totally by the moon. It has to do, obviously, with the rotations of the universe and the solar system, all the rest of it. And that's really cool. That's really neat stuff. Traditional religions had always suggested, before they knew any of the science, that things like solar eclipses, which obviously appeared incredibly rarely and were very scary to people, they had suggested that that was celestial movings in response to human sin. So human beings would sin, and then God would respond with a solar eclipse. Right now, obviously, we know better now. We know that that's science. The other way to view it from a religious perspective today would be to say that this is amazing and wonderful evidence of God's handiwork in the universe, the intricate workings of the universe that God created. Okay, all of those are sort of well within traditional monotheistic religion. Then there's the pagan view. The pagan view is that you sin against nature, and then the gods smack you. And that is the view that apparently has been taken by a wide variety of people across the United States, the most obvious of whom is the signal unintelligent person, Sunny Hostin, on The View. So Sunny Hostin was on The View yesterday, and she not only blamed the solar eclipse on climate change, she then blamed earthquakes also on climate change. Now, it may be that Sunny Hostin just doesn't know literally anything about science, or it may be that you are supposed to, in pagan circles, blame everything on man's sin against nature. That man has sinned against Gaia, and now Gaia will take her revenge. Because this makes no sense. Here is Sunny Hostin yesterday in the most spectacular scientific fail of the day.
We've got a solar eclipse. We've got the earthquake. Ran down the hallway.
The rapture is here.
The rapture's here. And then also I learned that the cicadas are coming.
Cicadas.
Although I love for the first time in like
No.
100 years.
No.
Two different. Well, this is what I read.
There's two different kinds of cicadas.
Yes, two different times are coming.
The good cicadas and the bad cicadas.
But for the first time in many, many years.
No, every 17 years this happens.
Well, that's not what I read, but maybe. Maybe you know better. But
in a way,
say all those things together would maybe lead one to believe that either climate change exists, or something is
returning.
Earthquakes are not at the mercy of climate change. It's underground.
No. It happens, and the eclipse. They've known about the eclipse coming because eclipses happen.
It's like watching a bunch of badgers try to understand higher math. Really amazing. But there is something to what Sunny Hostin is saying, and that is that if you live in this pagan world where the world takes its revenge on you for sinning against the climate, then you must pay homage to the climate. You don't have to try and solve a problem. It's not a real world problem that the climate is changing over time, and that maybe you adapt to that as human beings, or you try to mitigate particular activities. Instead, it is a sin against the climate. And you see sort of this additional move toward paganism across the spectrum. It's really, really weird. It's a weird thing that we are seeing. The same exact people who will say that monotheistic religion is a bunch of hocus pocus, those same people are wearing woo-woo crystals and talking about how the crystals are changing their elemental relationship to the universe. Yesterday, my wife and I tuned into the NASA broadcast of the eclipse because we were told by literally everyone, you are not allowed to look at the eclipse. You will die if you look at the eclipse, and all the rest of this sort of stuff. It is very funny how everyone's mentality changes with regard to the eclipse. Like, none of us ever think about looking at the sun because you just instinctively don't look at the sun because, don't look at the sun. When it comes to the eclipse, we all become idiots. In any case, NASA didn't just have on scientists to discuss the eclipse. Again, it's NASA. Okay, you're talking about a government-funded space agency. And they decided that they were going to bring on an indigenous scientist named Dr. David Begay to talk about the solar eclipse. And this is a weird thing. Okay, it's just weird.
Let's check in with Joy in Dallas to learn more about Indigenous astronomy.
When people think about science, they might be thinking of Western science. So, David, how does that relate to Indigenous science? And what did the total eclipse mean to the Navajo people?
I think the knowledge on the eclipse goes way back from time immemorial, I'm told by my elders. And they knew that when you look at the sun directly, you can damage your eyes permanently. And so they knew that about the danger of looking at the eclipse with the naked eye. So people were encouraged to go inside to ensure that people weren't looking up, especially the kids. So it goes way back. And as far as eclipses, it's a time of renewal, the sun alignment with the moon and also the earth alignment. The whole cosmic cycle goes through a regeneration process. It revitalizes the process. And so it's a gift that goes on for many years, over and over. It's a cycle. And as far as science goes, there's different definition of science.
No, there aren't. Okay, and the fact that NASA is promoting this crap is, again, a return to a sort of pre-scientific paganism. We'll get to more on this in just a second. First, when you use the bathroom, close the door behind you because you don't want random passerbys looking in on you. So also, don't let people look in on you when you go online. That's stupid. That's why you need ExpressVPN when you go online. Your internet service provider knows every single website you visit. What's worse, they can sell this information to ad companies and tech giants who will use your data to target you. ExpressVPN puts a stop to it. It creates a secure encrypted tunnel between your device and the internet so no one can see your online activity. I use ExpressVPN on all my devices. It works on everything from phones, laptops, even routers, so everyone who shares your Wi-Fi can still be protected even if they don't have ExpressVPN. Using ExpressVPN, it's a breeze. With a simple click of a button, you can confidently protect your online activity. ExpressVPN is not just any VPN, it's the world #1 rated VPN by Mashable, The Verge, countless others. You can be confident in how effective it is. So, if you're like me and you believe that your activity online is your business, secure yourself by visiting expressvpn.com/Ben today. Use my exclusive link at expressvpn.com/Ben. You can get an extra 3 months for free. That's expressvpn.com/Ben. Again, expressvpn.com/Ben. I love that NASA has on this indigenous scientist. Okay, what he's talking about there is not science. It is, in fact, religion of one sort or another. And NASA is promoting that. Now, would NASA have on a devotee of ancient Christian theology or ancient Jewish theology to talk about how man's sins caused the solar eclipse? I don't think so. But they have on the indigenous scientist to talk about how since ancient times, indigenous elders have said, don't look at this. Okay, so first of all, you don't need indigenous elders not to tell you not to look at the sun. I'm sorry. That doesn't require an insane amount of common sense. Don't look at the sun. Again, we instinctively don't look at the sun as human beings because if you do it for 1 second, it hurts your eyes. Okay, but the fact that NASA felt the necessity to do this, and diversity and inclusion apparently means that we have to pretend that quote unquote indigenous science is the same as Western science. Ancient peoples could not even properly chart the dates of solar eclipses because they didn't understand the science. So this kind of notion that we have to juxtapose that by, again, that's a government-funded agency. That's NASA. These are supposed to be our best scientists. These are the people who are going to put us on the moon. These are the people who help us get to Mars. And here they are interviewing indigenous science. Like, the kind of reversion to pagan ideology is really bizarre. And it does tie into something that has a moral underpinning. And that moral underpinning is that we are supposed to take as rote the idea that there are these sorts of sacrifices we make to the pagan universe, and then we backfill the rationale for them. And this is why on the left you see that once you get rid of monotheistic religion, you just fill it with some other form of religion. You could fill it with scientific atheism, which at least has a track record of, scientific progress. Or you can fill it with a pagan morality. And that pagan morality is what most people tend to fill it with. Which is why you see on The View, Whoopi Goldberg justifying abortion by citing the 10 Commandments. Because unfortunately on the left, again, when you get rid of Judeo-Christian religion, what you end up with is new sacraments. And the new sacraments of the far left include things like justifying child sacrifice in the sense that you are talking about the justification of the termination of pregnancy and calling it moral. This is a big difference from the 1990s. When I was growing up, safe, legal, and rare at least acknowledged the innate sinfulness and tragedy of an abortion. That's why it was supposed to be rare. Now the idea is that the 10 Commandments justify abortion. Here is moral scion Whoopi Goldberg.
And it's not mentioned in the Big Ten. I'm just going to say.
No.
In the Big Ten, it is not mentioned.
The commandments?
Yeah.
Isn't it?
You know, because I figured God was pretty clear. Here's the stuff that'll make your life better on earth. Here's the thing. Don't lie, because you don't want people lying to you. Don't mess with somebody's wife, because you're going to be mad if they're messing with yours. Just, you know, common sense stuff.
Say, thou shalt not kill.
They believe that.
Yes, well, here's the thing. I think thou shalt not kill cannot be used as the block, because we allow wars all the time.
Yes, we do.
The Crusades
No, you
were
idiot.
about all these things.
No, you stupid person. No.
Some conversation to be had here. So you can either thou shalt not kill for everybody.
Yes.
And everything.
And everything. Or we have to talk about all the things that you and I need to do.
Wait, so her logic is, just to get this straight, that when the Ten Commandments says thou shalt not murder, okay, the word is murder, it's not kill. As I mentioned yesterday on the show, the word in Hebrew for killing, if you were putting it in the Ten Commandments, would be lo taharog. It's a completely different word. The word in the Ten Commandments is lo tirtzach, which literally means do not murder, which is not the same thing, because you can kill in self-defense. That's not murder. She is basically saying that if you are willing to execute child rapists and murderers, then you should also be willing to excuse the killing of the unborn. Why? Because this is now a sacrament on the left. Let's be real about this. That is why they're now twisting the Bible. By the way, she's violating one of the 10 commandments right there by citing God as authority for abortion. She's violating number 3, not taking God's name in vain. It's kind of a biggie. The definition of taking God's name in vain, by the way, is not saying, gee, damn it. Okay, the definition of taking God's name in vain is justifying evil action in the name of God. That's what it is. And that's exactly what she is doing right there. But this has become a sacrament on the pagan left. On the pagan left, abortion is not just something terrible that sometimes people have to do. It is something that is an affirmative good. And that is perverse. And the sacraments include things like abortion, climate change, as well as, of course, trans ideology, which is why you had the bizarre spectacle yesterday of the legendary women's basketball coach Dawn Staley, who, again, is only famous because men and women have different leagues. Here she was yesterday suggesting that trans women should be allowed to play in NCAA events. Here we go.
I'm on the opinion of if you're a woman, you should play. If you consider yourself a woman and you want to play sports or vice versa, you should be able to play. That's my opinion. You want me to go deeper?
Do you think transgender women should be able to participate
that's your question
in
you
college
want
basketball?
Me to ask. I mean, you want to ask, so I'll give you that. Yes. So now the barnstorm of people are going to flood my timeline and be a distraction to me on one of the biggest days of our game. And I'm okay with that. I really am.
Okay, I'm just going to point out right here that we made an entire movie called Lady Ballers about precisely this problem, in which a bunch of men who are really, really too old for this and out of shape play a bunch of women. Okay, let's be real about this. There are a bunch of memes that were going around about Caitlin Clark. Caitlin Clark is a tremendous women's player, historically great women's player. She would not beat a very good, a half-decent high school boys basketball player in a one-on-one. She doesn't have the size for it. She doesn't have the body mass for it. She can't dunk. I'm sorry, this is so stupid. But again, the reason that Dawn Staley is saying this is not because she actually believes this. She's saying this because you have to repeat the nostrums of the pagan left. It is very important. These are all sacraments. Sacraments like men can be women. Sacraments like abortion is holy. Sacraments like if you pay homage to the climate change gods, then there won't be an earthquake or a solar eclipse. This is the bizarre universe which we now inhabit. And it is incumbent on moral people to push back against that bizarre universe by demonstrating some moral clarity. We'll get to more on this in just a moment. First, when you're running a business, your employees can create interesting situations. For example, somebody not showing up when they're supposed to, or an employee filing a complaint for which you don't have a documented policy or procedure, which is why you need to talk to Bambi. Bambi gives you access to your own dedicated HR manager starting at just $99 per month. This person is available by phone, email, and real-time chat. They'll help you run employee onboarding, terminations, and performance reviews. With Bambi's HR Autopilot feature, you can automate important HR practices like employee training and feedback procedures. All of Bambi's HR managers are based in the United States and can support the nuances across all 50 states. HR managers can easily cost $80,000 annually, but Bambi starts at just $99 monthly. Schedule a free conversation today. See how much Bambi can take off your plate. Go to Bambi.com right now. Type in Ben Shapiro under podcast when you sign up. Spelled BAMBEE.com. Bambi.com. Type in Ben Shapiro. Again, go check them out right now. Bambi.com. Type in Ben Shapiro under podcast to get started. And herein lies my problem with Donald Trump's message on abortion. So President Trump, y'all know that I'm a supporter of President Trump's. I've given money to his campaign. Donald Trump is taking a position on abortion that is eminently politically pragmatic. His position on abortion is that this is a state's issue, that this should be delegated to the states. Now, you could say two things about this. One would be moral, and one would have a real moral problem attached to it. The one that is moral is to say, yes, abortion is wrong. Yes, abortion is a great sin against God, against man. It is a terrible thing. Abortion is horrific. Also, the federal government of the United States has delegated powers. Those delegated powers typically do not extend into state criminal law with regard to things like abortion. The Supreme Court has kicked this back to the states and has made fairly clear in its own decision-making that it does not want the federal government sounding off on this. Not only that, we have pragmatic concerns about pushing forward a significant piece of abortion legislation in a highly divided country at a time when the country appears to be splintering. Thus, for pragmatic, not moral reasons, for pragmatic reasons, we wish to kick this back to the states so that there can continue to be a building of a coalescence around a stronger abortion position federally. That it takes time to actually get most Americans to accept a more moral position. And that on a pragmatic level, if you want a more pro-life country, you need to take that time to do it. And that is why I'm not supporting an immediate piece of significant abortion legislation, because the country is simply too divided. But when the opportunity presents itself, of course, from the executive level, I will do what I can to prevent abortion. And of course, I am personally pro-life and hope for a time when the American people are ready to accept an elected government that would, in fact, ban abortion, right? That would be the moral position, because that distinguishes between two different types of rights that we've talked about a lot on the program. One is a moral right and one is a legal immunity. Those are not the same thing. A moral right is the idea that, for example, in the United States, I do not have a moral right to say the N-word, to take an obvious example. There's no moral right, because it's not like a good thing to say the N-word. It's a bad thing. I do have the legal right to say the N-word because you don't want to delegate to the government the ability to crack down on speech. And any government with the power to crack down on somebody saying the N-word also has the capacity and power to crack down on things that actually are good, necessary, and truthful. And when you're talking about delegating powers to the federal government, you have to be very careful about which powers get delegated to the federal government, including in the realm of criminal law, right? That would be the distinction. So abortion can be extremely wrong. And also, because of the extraordinary diversity of the United States and the internal fissures of the United States, it is difficult to pragmatically find a piece of... Now, listen, I disagree with him positionally. I think that on a federal level, you could push a piece of 15-week abortion legislation. This is Mike Pence's proposal. He happens to be right about that. But if Trump wanted to make the pragmatic case for why he is doing what he is doing, you could do that and still do it morally, because you'd say you actually distinguish between the moral and the pragmatic. The problem with Trump's statement on abortion is that he takes a relatively morally unclear stance on abortion itself. And that's a problem. So here's his statement yesterday.
My view is now that we have abortion where everybody wanted it from a legal standpoint, the states will determine by vote or legislation or perhaps both, and whatever they decide must be the law of the land. In this case, the law of the state. Many states will be different. Many will have a different number of weeks, or some will have more conservative than others, and that's what they will be. At the end of the day, this is all about the will of the people. You must follow your heart, or in many cases, your religion or your faith. Do what's right for your family and do what's right for yourself. Do what's right for your children. Do what's right for our country and vote. So important to vote. At the end of the day, it's all about will of the people. That's where we are right now, and that's what we want, the will of the people.
Okay, so this is the part where I have serious moral differences with President Trump on this matter. Okay, when President Trump says it's about the will of the people, no, it really isn't. It really is not about the will of the people. That is a bad answer. That's a bad answer, because if the will of the people were to enshrine slavery in a particular state, obviously we would not allow it. This was actually it was a position taken by Stephen Douglas during the Lincoln-Douglas debates. The position of Stephen Douglas during the Lincoln-Douglas debates prior to the Civil War was what he called popular sovereignty. The idea was that if a state wanted slavery, it could vote to enshrine slavery. And if a state didn't want slavery, it could vote to not enshrine slavery or to ban slavery. That is a not good moral position. Now, again, you can make a pragmatic case for the Stephen Douglas position on abortion by simply saying, this is the structure of the federal government, and until such time as we have a full-scale consensus at the top level of American government, it's going to be very difficult on a pragmatic level to push any significant abortion legislation. And so my job is to help build that moral consensus until we have a political consensus. Right? That you could say. It's the moral relativism in the position that's the problem. Okay, that's my problem with it. We'll get some more on this in just 1 second. First, sleep is the foundation of our mental and physical health. You have to have a consistent nighttime routine to function at your very best. Beam Dream contains a powerful all-natural blend of reishi, L-theanine, epigenin, and melatonin to help you fall asleep, stay asleep, and wake up refreshed. It's not just your run-of-the-mill sleep aid. It's a concoction carefully crafted to help you slip into the sweet embrace of rest without the grogginess that often accompanies other sleep remedies. Today, my listeners get a special discount on Beam's Dream Powder, their best-selling hot cocoa for sleep with no added sugar. Now they have available new delicious flavors like cinnamon cocoa, chocolate peanut butter, mint chip. Better sleep has never tasted better. I know my producers have been using Beam Dream. They come into the office, they're refreshed, they're ready to go, they're ready for the fight. Just mix Beam Dream into hot water or milk, stir or froth, enjoy before bedtime. If you find yourself battling the bedtime blues, give it a shot. Your weary self will thank you. If you want to try Beam's best-selling Dream Powder, take advantage of 40% off for a limited time when you go to shopbeam.com/Ben and use code Ben at checkout. That's shopbeam.com/Ben with my promo code Ben for up to 40% off your order. That's shopbeam.com/Ben. On a political level, what Trump is doing here is very smart, as I mentioned yesterday. On a political level, Trump is looking at the polling data. He's looking at what happened in Kansas. He's looking at what happened in Michigan. And he is saying to himself, you know what? I don't feel like fighting this issue all the way up to the election. If this turns into a battle over abortion, in which Joe Biden is running to enshrine abortion, and I'm being characterized as wanting to ban abortion across the board, then that's going to be a problem. Now, I think he could draw, again, that same pragmatic middle line with regard to 15 weeks, because that would force Democrats into the unenviable position of having to promote late-term abortion. Because after all, he could say, listen, I'm not trying to ban abortion early term. You're talking about 4 months. That is a very, very late-term abortion at this point. He could make that case, but he's not making that case. I understand why he's doing so politically. But again, my problem is the moral imprimatur that he is putting on a relativistic perspective to abortion. But what he's doing politically is he's trying to take himself out of the battle. And so when he is slamming Lindsey Graham politically, he's not wrong. So Lindsey Graham is pro-life. And Lindsey Graham he said that he respectfully disagreed with Trump's stance. He reiterated his own support for a 15-week ban. And then Trump responded, quote, many good Republicans lost elections because of this issue. And people like Lindsey Graham that are unrelenting are handing Democrats their dream of the House, Senate, and perhaps even the presidency. Graham responded, quote, we should draw a line. I believe what I believe. The idea of the Republican Party abandoning the opposition to late-term abortion, I think would be a mistake because most Americans oppose late-term abortion. And then Trump got more personal in his critiques. He said, I blame myself for Lindsey Graham and urged the South Carolina Republican and Marjorie Dannenfelser, who is the president of the Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America, who expressed disappointment with Trump's stance, to quote-unquote study the Constitution. He said when they do, they should proudly get on with helping Republicans to win elections rather than making it impossible for them to do so. It's an interesting political play. Again, I think that morally speaking, Lindsey Graham is correct and Trump is wrong. But it's an interesting political play by Trump because he's basically saying to his Republican base, trust me on abortion. I want to take it off the table. Just trust me. I think it'll work. I think most Republicans, because after all, he did, in fact, nominate the justices who ended up overturning Roe v. Wade, are going to give him a lot of latitude on this particular issue, including pro-life Republicans. With that said, the job of the pro-life movement has shifted since the overturning of Roe v. Wade. The job of the pro-life movement is, in the states where they can, to promote pro-life legislation, which they have been doing, to the extent that they can gain long-term wins. The pro-life movement, in other words, could fight a purist battle in terms of overturning Roe versus Wade, because it was a simple yes-no question. Should it be overturned? Should it not be overturned? Now the job of the pro-life movement is to craft a pragmatic political response to the left-wing idea that all abortion should be enshrined in the aftermath of the overturning of Roe versus Wade. And Trump is acknowledging the pragmatism. Again, the moral problem with what Trump is doing is he is pretending that the pragmatic position is the moral position, which is not quite the same thing. Okay, now, what's weird about what Trump is doing a little bit is that Donald Trump always has this he has good political instincts in the sense that he kind of knows what is somewhat popular with the American public and what is not. The thing he needs to do and what he's trying to do with the abortion issue is to take it off the table, specifically because it elevates him. If the abortion issue is front and center, then it becomes a referendum on Donald Trump and abortion, the election, as opposed to a referendum on Joe Biden's terrible presidency. This is why, even though it's funny, I think that it's bad politics to, for example, put out commercials with Trump blotting out the sun. So yesterday, I mean, it's funny. It's funny. Again, Donald Trump's a very funny guy, and his campaign is very funny. But Donald Trump put out an ad during the solar eclipse in which he blots out the sun. Here it is. He says, the most important moment is a giant picture of the sun. In human history. And then it's a bunch of people looking into the sky with their shades on, looking at the eclipse. It says, is taking place in 2024. Spoiler alert, it's not, but it's okay. Many more important points in human history. Invention of fire. Okay, and here comes what looks like the moon in front of the sun, but it is not, in fact, the moon. It is, in fact, the giant profiled head of Donald Trump emerging to blot out the sun. I mean, like, it's funny. Again, Donald Trump is a very funny guy, and his campaign is very funny. Also, if you want this election to be about Joe Biden, do you want an ad of your head blotting out the sun? I don't understand the possibility. We will save America. And it's a picture of Donald Trump's head blotting out the sun as people celebrate below, looking up at the sun. Again, oh my gosh. That's some strong stuff right there. Okay, make America great again. Okay, President Trump needs to decide if he wants to be at the center of the campaign or if he wishes to be at the periphery of the campaign and let Joe Biden be at the center of the campaign. Get some more on this in a moment. First, do you owe back taxes or still have unfiled returns? Not only is owing back taxes stressful, but the IRS has also become more determined than ever to come after you. The IRS's chief data and analytics officer revealed they are focused on an enforcement project with an average return on investment of about $6 for every $1 spent. They're targeting individuals and businesses that currently owe back taxes or haven't filed their returns first. Tax Network USA, the nation's leading tax relief firm, knows the tax code they will fight for you. With a record of negotiating over $1 billion in tax relief for their clients, their team is knowledgeable in handling any type of tax issue. Whether you owe $10 grand or $10 million, they can help. Even if you don't have all your personal or business records from over the years, they can get you filed up to date. Facing the IRS without a professional, not a smart move. Contact Tax Network USA for the best strategic advice to help reduce or even eliminate your tax debt. Call today, 1-800-245-6000, or visit their website at tnusa.com/Shapiro. They'll give you a free private consultation on how you can settle your tax debt today. That's tnusa.com/Shapiro, tnusa.com/Shapiro. Political advice. Okay, now back to the pragmatic side. Don't be at the center of the campaign. Let Joe Biden screw it up. It's fine. Just let him screw it up. He will, I promise. Speaking of which, brand new Gallup poll is out showing that Americans have serious distrust issues with Joe Biden. So there are 6 different characteristics that are polled between Trump and Biden. And here's where they stand. Can manage the government effectively. Donald Trump currently leads by 10 points. Can manage the government effectively. That's how much people dislike Joe Biden. 49-39. Donald Trump now leads on that. Is likable. Joe Biden leads Donald Trump on that one by 20 points. Still, he used to lead by 30. Now he leads by 20. This is why Donald Trump needs to go to the side, because people in America look at Donald Trump and they don't consider, his base likes him. His base thinks he's funny. The vast majority of Americans, by the polling data, not huge fans of Donald Trump on the personal level. They just liked his presidency. Displays good judgment in a crisis. Donald Trump now leads by 5. Is a strong and decisive leader. Donald Trump now leads by 19 points. 19 is a strong and decisive leader. Cares about the needs of people like you. It's a big shift here. Donald Trump is now down in that category by about 6 points. But Joe Biden is below 50%. Is honest and trustworthy. Joe Biden used to lead in that category by 12. He now leads in that category by 11, but he's down to 46%. Okay, these are bad numbers for Joe Biden, obviously. And Biden's most recent favorable rating, according to Gallup, 41%, is down 8 points from the end of the 2020 campaign. Trump's 42% is statistically similar to his 45% in 2020. So in other words, when people focus in on Joe Biden, they don't like Joe Biden, which is why Donald Trump is trying to get out of the way on abortion. He should try to do that throughout his campaign. Get out of the way. Let Joe Biden be the center of attention. Let Joe Biden's head blot out the sun for a change. Because nobody wants that. Let people think of Joe Biden's head blocking out the sun. That would be the way to do this, politically speaking. Now, meanwhile, Joe Biden is out on the campaign trail, and he is doing a couple of things, making a fool of himself and promoting programs that specifically cater to targeted segments of his voting base. So making a fool of himself, Jill Biden is the effective president of the United States. Joe Biden, as was recently reported, basically convinced Joe Biden that Hamas needs to be reestablished in the Gaza Strip. That's how powerful Jill Biden is in her massive intellectual achievement. It is hard to think of a less intelligent power couple than Joe and Jill Biden. Very, very power couple. Not a huge number of IQ points between them. In any case, here was Joe Biden saying that he gets instructions from his wife. I know, we all believe you.
I get instructions from my wife, who's a school teacher.
Oh, no. We know you do. We know. Edith Wilson over there signing all the bills. So that is piece one of his campaign, is him being senile and doddering around and instilling zero confidence. And the other piece is he's just going to try and buy off particular constituencies. He knows he needs young voters. He's been underpolling among young voters. In fact, there are some polls that suggest he's losing young voters outright. Well, now he's pushing yet another round of student loan relief. It doesn't matter. The Supreme Court said you can't do this. He is going to buck the Supreme Court and then claim that Donald Trump is the threat to democracy. According to the Wall Street Journal, the Biden administration is proposing a sweeping initiative to slash student debt for nearly 30 million Americans, a plan likely to face legal challenges from Republicans who helped kill an earlier White House attempt at large-scale loan cancellation. The regulations will be rolled out in the coming months, according to the administration. They say they hope the first debt relief will kick in this fall. Wait, what's happening this fall? Oh, yeah, it's right before the election. So here was Joe Biden announcing new plans to cancel student loan debt, again, in defiance of actual law.
From day one, my administration has been committed to fixing the broken student loan system and making sure higher education is a ticket to the middle class, not a barrier. My administration has approved debt cancellation for 4 million Americans through various actions. And today, I'm announcing new plans that would cancel student debt for millions more. In total, these plans would cancel some or all student debt for 30 million Americans.
He's so old.
When combined with everything we've done so far.
My favorite thing about every Joe Biden video is the cuts every 2.7 milliseconds because he cannot get through a full sentence. He then bragged, by the way, about ignoring the Supreme Court. Remember, Donald Trump is the threat to law and order, not Joe Biden, who literally brags about defying the Supreme Court.
Tens of millions of people's debt was literally about to get canceled. But then some of my Republican friends and elected officials and special interests sued us, and the Supreme Court blocked us. But that didn't stop us. No, I mean it sincerely. We continue to find alternatives passed to reduce student debt payments.
I love that. The Supreme Court said no, but it didn't stop us. Don't worry, Donald Trump is the lawless one. But again, the campaign of Joe Biden, he's trying to redux 2012. As always, this is the entire Democratic campaign strategy. Cobble together corners of the weirdos, various constituent groups, cobble that together into a big coalition, and then attempt to win based on that coalition. So he's going to pay off various constituencies. So there we see him trying to pay off young people by canceling student loan debt in violation of actual law. And of course, he's trying to buy off, as we've been mentioning, his actual pro-Hamas base, which is morally disgusting. Trying to buy off people who chant death to America, who believe that the West is evil, who hate Israel specifically because it is an outpost of Western civilization in the Middle East, who are actively standing for a terrorist group, is totally insane. But that's precisely what Joe Biden is doing. We'll get to that in just one moment. First, this is your reminder. Tonight is the premiere of the brand new series Judged by Matt Walsh on Daily Wire Plus. That's right. It appears that somebody here at the Daily Wire thought it was a great idea to grant the most hypercritical human being on the planet the authority of a bona fide judge. Now, I'm sitting right here. I'm a Harvard Law graduate, cum laude. Matt Walsh, whose knowledge of the law is just extraordinary. He is now officially Judge Walsh. That's a thing that's happening in real life. Take a look at the official trailer for the new Daily Wire Plus series, Judged by Matt Walsh, right now.
All rise for the Honorable Judge Walsh. Please be seated. Miss Goldstein, Mr. Bentley, Mr. Outerbridge, Miss Spicer,
Your Honor.
Mr. Barney,
Yes, Your Honor.
Miss Singh.
Yeah. At 30,000 feet, my lips exploded.
Why would I pay rent to somebody who had sex with my sister?
A dog bit my finger.
He's allergic, like the grass.
If he didn't want me to drive the car, he would have took the key. I had it with him.
Has anyone told you you're the worst negotiator that's ever lived? I've never been more annoyed than I am in this moment. Not even close. That does it. Please get the hell out of my courtroom.
If you thought our current legal system was a joke, get ready for this one. Be the first to see Judged by Matt Walsh tonight, 8 p.m. Eastern on Daily Wire Plus. By the way, it's actually, it's hysterically funny. If you don't already have a Daily Wire Plus membership, get it now for 35% off with code JUDGED at checkout. Go to dailywire.com/subscribe. Okay, meanwhile, the Biden administration, in an attempt to pay off its pro-Hamas voters in Michigan particularly, is now putting pressure on Israel to literally leave Hamas in place in Rafah. Rafah is the last outpost of Hamas in the Gaza Strip. There are apparently 4 battalions of terrorists in the Gaza Strip. I remind you once again, they're actual Americans who are being held by Hamas. And the Biden administration is putting pressure on Israel. Why? Because they don't like the bad images on TV of things called war. War, it turns out, is really ugly and really terrifying. And lots of people die in wars, which is why you shouldn't start one with a militarily superior country by killing 1,200 of its citizens and taking 250 of them hostage. And the fact that the West now believes that the moral stain is on Israel in defending itself and attempting to kill off Hamas while gaining back its hostages is a moral sickness. It is a moral sickness, what we are seeing in the West. Forget about the impact on Israel. Think about the fact that the United States is now telling a Democratic ally it cannot extirpate 4 battalions of actual terrorists knowing precisely where they are because it might be too mean on the TVs. Again, the actual math that the administration has now engaged in because they want to win Michigan. It's perfectly cynical. They just want to win Michigan. But the actual math for the future of combat for American troops in future conflicts is going to be very simple. If you are a bad guy, here is what you do. You do something really bad to America. Then you go and hide behind women and children. And then apparently, it's like when you're playing tag and you're a kid and the tree is safe. If you go and hide behind women and children, which is a war crime, then the idea is you have some sort of immunity. So Hamas now has immunity specifically because it is acting worse than a normal army. So the Geneva Conventions were designed to incentivize people to not engage in terrorism. This is, for example, why you are allowed to treat people out of uniform differently than you treat people in uniform. If you capture someone in uniform, they become a prisoner of war. If you capture somebody out of uniform, they are now an enemy combatant, and they get treated differently by the law under international. Why? Because the goal was to convince people not to engage in terroristic activities that endanger civilians. That's the entire purpose of things like the Geneva Conventions. Well, now the West has turned this completely on its head. So if, in fact, you're fighting in an army with a uniform on, then we all understand you can be droned from above, you can be killed using any form or fashion of military largesse that can be brought to bear. If, however, you dress in civilian clothing, murder a child in a kibbutz, run back into Gaza, and hide behind another child, now you're immune, according to the United States. Because the duty is to the United States, apparently, and to the West, not to harm the second child, even though you cannot save any future children if you allow the terrorists to remain in place. It doesn't matter. The West has turned. Why? Because Joe Biden is attempting to please his left-wing radical base. And this is true in most of these countries. There's an insane op-ed signed by the leaders of Jordan, France, and Egypt calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Now, let's make clear exactly what these various countries are worried about. Jordan is worried that if Hamas is not left in place, and if the war continues, that the ticked-off Palestinians who are pro-Hamas in Jordan will overthrow the Hashemite dynasty. That is the reason why they've decided to actively act against what would be in their political interest, the extirpation of Hamas, because they know that if things get really rough, then they might be overthrown. This is why you see Queen Rania of Jordan, who's Palestinian herself, talking about Israel's war crimes. Why? Not because the Jordan Hashemite dynasty cares deeply about the Palestinians. If they did, they wouldn't have killed tens of thousands of them during Black September in 1973. Instead, what they are doing is they're attempting to buy off their own Palestinian population by yelling at Israel so they themselves don't end up with their heads on pikes. The Jordanian dynasty has a really nice life. They get to jet set around the globe. They have zero connection with their own population. 70% of the population of Jordan is Palestinian Arab. The Hashemite dynasty is not Palestinian Arab. So what are they really afraid of? They're afraid of being killed. Meanwhile, you have the leaders of Egypt. Egypt wants Israel to ceasefire because what they are afraid of is that if Egypt continues to put pressure on Rafah, then two things will happen. One, there are a bunch of terror tunnels that connect Egypt to Rafah. It's right on the border of the Gaza Strip. And they're afraid that Egypt's terror tunnels in that area are going to be uncovered, and it's going to make for some very uncomfortable political days ahead for the Egyptian regime. That's why they don't care if Israel went into Gaza City or into Khan Yunis, but they really, really care if Israel goes into Rafah. That is point number one. Point number two, they're afraid that if Israel goes into Rafah, there might be pressure on Egypt to take in Palestinian refugees. Again, right now, understand that the rest of the world is forcing Palestinians who are not in their homes right now because Israel has had to try to extirpate Hamas in these areas and destroy terror tunnels and destroy terror bases. The rest of the world will not allow Palestinians to leave, even if they want to, even temporarily. And that's particularly true of Egypt. Egypt will not accept one Palestinian, even temporarily, into a refugee camp south of the Gaza border because they are afraid that that will increase terrorism in their own state. So that's why Egypt wants the ceasefire. France wants the ceasefire because a very heavy percentage of Paris is Arab Muslim. And so they are deeply afraid of the radicals in their own country. They are cowards, in other words. Plus, France, you can't expect moral courage out of the French anytime in the recent past. They have an entire piece in the Washington Post saying the war in Gaza and catastrophic humanitarian suffering it is causing must end now. Violence, terror, and war cannot bring peace to the Middle East. The two-state solution will. So in other words, if Israel were to hand over governmental control to an unspecified terror group in Gaza and the West Bank, that would magically create peace in the Middle East. This is the stupidest crap I have ever heard. You know how we know that's not true? Because it's been tried multiple times. From 1948 to 1967, Jordan controlled the West Bank. Egypt controlled the Gaza Strip. You know what happened? A war in 1956, a war in 1967. Then Israel controlled the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. War in 1973. War in 1982 on the Lebanese border. Intifada number 1 in the late 80s. Then Israel decides, you know what? We'll try it your way. We will concede large chunks of the West Bank to an arch-terrorist, Yasser Arafat, as well as the Gaza Strip. Mass terror attacks in 2000, 2001 in the second Intifada. Then in 2005, Israel's like, you know what? We'll try it even harder your way. We'll completely pull out of the Gaza Strip, and that will be your effective state. And instead, the Palestinians destroyed every element of infrastructure that had Jewish imprint on it. They destroyed greenhouses. They destroyed pipelines. They destroyed infrastructure. And then they took every bit of aid that poured into the Gaza Strip and turned it into the biggest network of terror tunnels in human history and proceeded to use every dollar in order to upgrade the military capacity of Hamas at the behest of Iran as well. So anyone who suggests that what Israel really needs to do is concede more to terrorists, what are you even... It's bull. It's bull. You have other interests at heart. You don't care about, quote unquote, peace in the Middle East, which is why, by the way, you want to talk about the insane Biden administration approach to the Middle East? So the Biden administration oriented itself from the outset against the Saudis. Forget about the Israelis. They oriented themselves from the very outset of the administration against the Saudi Arabian government. Joe Biden made a big deal over the killing of Jamal Khashoggi, who is a Muslim Brotherhood associated quasi-journalist who was killed by the Saudi regime. Terrible thing for the Saudi regime to do. Also, welcome to the Middle East, where terrible things happen literally every day. And where the United States is constantly dealing with truly terrible regimes that commit human rights atrocities on the regular. Israel is the least of these concerns. So the United States treated the Saudi regime as pariahs. The Saudis were ready to normalize with the Israelis day one of the Biden administration. The Biden administration tried to cram down a two-state solution on the Saudis. The Saudis don't want a two-state solution. They understand that a Palestinian state in the West Bank and Gaza Strip would be a terror threat to them. It would be an Iranian proxy, another Iranian proxy in the region. So the Biden administration is now joining with Jordan and Egypt and France in order to put pressure on Israel. So the United States is making fresh ceasefire proposals despite the fact that Hamas is rejecting every ceasefire proposal. How do you know that Hamas has the upper hand diplomatically right now? Hamas has been completely destroyed in most of the Gaza Strip. At least 13 to 14,000 of its soldiers are dead. Its command and control capacity in most of the Gaza Strip is gone. They are relegated to Rafah, and they are turning down deals. Why? Because they know they have the get-out-of-jail-free card. The get-out-of-jail-free card is Western weakness. Show enough ugly pictures on the TV, and Joe Biden will flip and suddenly endorse Hamas remaining in power in places like Rafah. They'll provide Israel with no alternatives. Israel has upped the aid. It doesn't matter. The United States is saying, well, we still don't think it's enough. We'll get to more on this in just a moment. First, while Jeremy, Caleb, and I were building our business, we looked for no-brainer companies to help streamline processes. Stamps.com does exactly that. If we'd wasted hours at the post office all day, every day, we wouldn't have been able to grow into the company we are today. Stamps.com lets you print your own postage and shipping labels from your home or office. It's incredibly convenient. You can prepare your shipping labels in minutes and get back to running your business sooner. Even better, you can take care of orders from anywhere with their mobile app. Scheduling package pickup, it's really easy through the Stamps.com dashboard. For 25 years, Stamps.com has been indispensable to over 1 million businesses. You can print postage wherever you do business. There are no lines, traffic, or waiting. They'll even send you a free scale, so you'll have everything you need to get started. Sign up at Stamps.com/Shapiro for a special offer that includes a 4-week trial plus free postage and a free digital scale. No long-term commitments, no contracts. Just go to Stamps.com/Shapiro. Again, that's Stamps.com/Shapiro. Go check them out right now. Stamps.com/Shapiro. That's Stamps.com/Shapiro. The State Department yesterday said they are against any full-scale military operation inside Rafah, which is the only thing that could actually extirpate Hamas. Meanwhile, CIA Director William Burns is presenting a new proposal to help advance a deal between Israel and Hamas to end a 6-month war in Gaza and release the remaining hostages. So they're proposing that Hamas release 40 of the more than 100 captives still held in Gaza. The problem is Hamas, under the table, is claiming there aren't 40 alive. There aren't 40 women and children that are still alive. Most of them are already dead. They've already killed most of them or let most of them die or put them in positions where they would be killed by Israeli ordnance. The United States is pushing these deals. Hamas is rejecting every one. Why? Because, again, they know they have the upper hand diplomatically. That is what is happening right here. This is why you have people like Elizabeth Warren trying to declare the Gaza war a genocide. This is why the United States welcomed an uptick in humanitarian assistance, according to the Times of Israel, that entered Gaza over the weekend, but reiterated it was reserving judgment until the amount of aid increases further and is sustained over a longer period of time. The Biden administration has said that the number one goal of the Israelis should be humanitarian aid in Gaza. There has never been a war where the number one goal is the humanitarian aid to the civilian population of an enemy party. Again, pick any war that the United States has ever fought, not a counterinsurgency, an actual war, in which the number one priority was providing humanitarian aid to the civilian population that supports the enemy. That's ridiculous. But that's what the United States is. And again, do I think that that's coming from a good place? No, I think it's coming from a very bad place. I think it's coming from political calculation for Joe Biden. And I think it's coming from an anti-Western place for a fringe of the Democratic Party that Joe Biden is trying to win. And it's amazing. Joe Biden once said that he got into the race in 2020 because of Charlottesville. And because mythically, Donald Trump suggested that there were very fine neo-Nazis, which he never said. That because of that, because Donald Trump's rhetoric was confused and discombobulated on the Charlottesville rally, white supremacist rally, and Antifa counter rally and all of this, that because of that, he couldn't stand still for anti-Semitism. Now he is caving to people who are just as anti-Semitic, if not more, than the Unite the Right folks at Charlottesville. People who chant death to America. People who openly want a terrorist group to remain in power in the Middle East. And he's catering to those people. It's pathetic, which is why Donald Trump is totally correct when he says that Jews who are voting for Joe Biden, obviously Israel is not a top priority for them. He's right about that, obviously.
They don't want to talk about that. They don't want to talk about the attack of October 7th on Israel because Biden is no fan of Israel. Any Jewish person that votes for Biden does not love Israel. And frankly, it should be spoken to. How a Jewish person can vote for Biden or a Democrat, because they are on the side 100% of the Palestinians, and he doesn't know how to get out of it. He's stuck. But he is, if you look at what he's done, he is totally on the side of the Palestinians. And frankly, it's incredible that historically Jewish people vote for Democrats.
So what he says is a lot of people are still voting out of habit. But if you're a Jew and you're voting for a Democratic Party that is providing shield and sword to actual terrorist supporters, he's not wrong. He's not right. Now, the dirty secret, of course, is that many Jews don't care about Israel. Many Jews don't care about Judaism very much, let alone Israel. There are a lot of people out there who claim that who will do the as a Jew routine, specifically because it allows them to not be white. As a Jew, I'm a minority too. I'm part of the intersectional structure. No, you're not. No, you're not. Judaism is both a religion and an ethnicity. There are a lot of people who are ethnically Jewish who are not in any way, shape, or form ideologically or religiously Jewish, which is why the Orthodox community in the United States is going to vote almost 100% for Donald Trump, particularly after Joe Biden's pathetic, immoral showing in the Middle East right now. So Trump's going to take a lot of flack from this, particularly from left-wing Jews who go to shul once every year for half the day and break for lunch on Yom Kippur. But he ain't wrong. Meanwhile, big case out of Tennessee. Apparently, there are two parties to a bizarre car crash case. One party is claiming that another party, named Guzman, took his car, but he was uninsured without his permission, and then she crashed the car, and she refused to pay for the damages. And then she says that it's actually the other guy's fault because he left the keys where she could see them. I don't even understand how this is a case, but joining us on the line to discuss how it is a case is Matt Walsh, who is a judge for some reason because of his legal acumen and law degree, and because obviously I'm not in charge of this company in any way, shape, or form. Judge Matt Walsh. Do I have to call you Judge, or can I just call you Matt? What is it? Your Honor? Your Honor.
Your Honor. Your Honor will do just fine.
Okay.
Your Eminence.
Okay.
Your Eminence could also work if you'd prefer that.
Okay, not going to do any of that. So Matt, what happened in this case? Why did it come before you? And what was your judge? I can't believe this is a real thing. And what was your judgment?
Are you talking to me? I didn't hear are you talking to me?
Oh, good Lord.
I didn't understand. I don't know who you're talking to because I didn't hear my name, so I don't know. I'm not sure who's being referred to right now.
All right. I'll humor you. I'll use your chosen pronouns. Your Honor.
Yes.
What happened in this case?
Well, this is a very interesting case because as you summed up, you have, and this will be featured in the premiere episode of Judged, my new court show. You have a gentleman who's dating a woman. His car was taken and crashed, and he owns the car, and his girlfriend took it without permission and crashed it. Now, you might think that makes it pretty simple. However, what you don't realize is that, as she points out, well, she has a habit of stealing things. He knows that, and yet he's left the keys on the counter in full view of her. And I'll add one other detail, and I don't want to give away any spoilers. But and what I do is people come before me and we talk about these cases and we bring out all the different details, even details that maybe to a lesser judge would seem totally irrelevant. To me, nothing is irrelevant. So it later comes out that this man perhaps had not been faithful to the woman. And so does that in some way morally justify the act of theft and vandalism? Very, very interesting. It's a very dense legal case. It might be something that, Ben, you might have some difficulty following it. But what you can be assured of is that at the end we arrive at the right conclusion, of course.
I will admit that we did not cover cases quite like this one in my torts class at Harvard Law School, Your Honor. But
in your what class?
Since you are commenting, yes, in my it's called torts. But in any case,
retorts. Well, retorts are really important in the courtroom. Responses, retorts, all these things do come up in my legal experience as well.
I can't wait until somebody here greenlights a show with Matt Walsh in which he explains physics. This is like, wow. Okay, so, Your Honor, since we have you in the chair over here, I did want to get your take on some other pressing legal matters. Like, did you have any opinions on Chevron deference? I know this is coming up before the Supreme Court very soon. Chevron deference, which has been the law of the land since like 1984. Do you have any thoughts on Chevron deference?
I do. I have many thoughts. In fact, I have so many thoughts about it that it almost is difficult for me to explain what my thoughts are. In fact, it would take more time than we have to even go into all of my thoughts. But what I'll say about Chevron deference is that, in this case, what I have found, it's really interesting, is that on one hand, you have a group of people who are claiming something. And then on the other hand, you have a group of people that are claiming another thing. And they're both going before the court with different perspectives, you might even say different facts that they're bringing before the court, different, what we call them, arguments. And it's very, very fascinating, very perplexing. But anyway, I could go on and on and on about it. But that's just sort of a summary of my thoughts on that particular case.
Wow. I mean, I'm blown away by that analysis. Absolutely blown away. Again, folks, if you ever needed better evidence that I have nothing to do with, the actual decision-making around here, this would be it. Maybe you have an opinion on Marbury versus Madison. I mean, that's a pretty important legal case. Wow. Do you have is that a quill? Is that like an actual quill that you're writing with, Judge?
I do have a quill pen. In fact, I was usually when I get these kind of legal questions, I can write down. In fact, I've written extensively with my quill pen on my scroll that I have here about that particular case that you just mentioned, and I'd be happy to share those documents with you, Ben. I will tell you that I'm feeling in this moment. I'm feeling a little bit. I'm feeling quizzed. I feel like I'm being quizzed right now. I don't even know if these questions are being offered in good faith or not. If you really are interested, I could give you. I have stacks of documents where I've written about these cases. I could share them with you. But what I will say about that particular case, what's the case again?
Marbury versus Madison. Kind of important case.
Yeah, and that's a tough one. Look, that's a tough one. It's a very difficult one. Again, that's one where you have multiple arguments. And what I've found is that both sides present their arguments, and what we do is we analyze them and we think about it. And what I found is that there are arguments on both sides. But here's the thing, only one argument is right.
Wow. Well, that is Judge Matt Walsh and all of his Solomonic wisdom. Since you have such deep thoughts on those cases, maybe at least you could tell us where we can view your brand new show, Judged by Matt Walsh.
Well, the premiere will be available on YouTube and on Daily Wire and on Twitter, pretty much every place you can find it. And then from henceforth, as we say in the legal realm, you can find all the episodes on dailywire.com.
Well, that is Judged by Matt Walsh. And as you can see, if you're looking for brilliant legal analysis and in-depth knowledge of case law, you could find no better jurist than Matt Walsh. All right, Matt. Sorry, Your Honor. I'll see you later. All right, guys, the rest of the show is continuing right now. We'll be getting into Joe Biden's China policy, again, discombobulated. If you're not a member, become a member, use code Shapiro. Check out for 2 months free on all annual plans. Click that link in the description and join us.